And the Nangway Rishu Nalone, she some call Subutu, mixing Tonaji Chayungudu.
So I'll very briefly summarize. So the point His Holiness was making is that if you look at the resources that we find in Buddhism, the primary emphasis is really placed on understanding the nature of reality, as was mentioned before. And one of the key points that emerges is that a fundamental source of our problem, from which all the afflictions arise, is really ignorance about the nature of reality. And one of the aim is to find a way to bring an end to that entire mechanism that give rise to these afflictions rooted in ignorance. And one approach seems to be, as we mentioned before, in naturally, there are progressive levels of consciousness, and the subtlest one arising naturally at the point of death. So one technique that we see in Buddhism is an approach which culminates in the advanced Vajrayana text, particularly the highest yoga tantra, but the indications of this is already in the third turning teachings, where there is an emphasis on understanding what could be referred to as the subjective clear light, where the understanding is that there is progressive levels of subtlety in consciousness. And as you reach further and further subtle, then you are moving further and further away from the influences of conceptualization and all the other grosser levels of activity. So in Tantric, Vajrayana approach seems to be really trying to use techniques. Some of these may be a pranayama, wind-based yogic practices, which are aimed at progressively bringing our own states of consciousness to progressively deeper, subtler states, which are further and further freer from these influences of the afflictions. That's one way of ultimately moving towards this pure luminosity. The other approach, and that needs to be combined, is what we find in the teachings of the second turning of the wheel, the perfection of wisdom teachings, and which are really articulated and explained, elaborated in Nagarjuna's writing and Aryadeva and their writings. And there, the point being made is that underlying all of our perception of reality is this fundamental grasping at some kind of enduring intrinsic reality, and which then serves as the basis for creating this whole edifice of our naive perception of reality, which then give rise to our emotional relation to the world and all of this. So the aim here is to really get our understanding of the actual reality itself right. And again, through a process of deconstruction, layers after layer, working at our various levels of grasping and deconstructing them through pointing out how actually the way the world seems to us is not the way actually the world exists. And one point, for example, Aryadeva makes is that the way in which the ignorance, grasping at intrinsic objective existence, is so pervasive. It's like just as the body faculty pervades all of our other senses, in the same manner, this ignorance pervades, this reifying ignorance pervades all of our perceptions of reality. And therefore, the only way in which we can undo this is to gain insight into the emptiness of which is the ultimate reality. And therefore, understand world purely in terms of dependent origination. And so Aryadeva says, therefore, those who are serious about this should really strive to always engage in the discourse on dependent origination. So the point here is that whether it is increasingly refining our understanding of actual objective world by way of the emptiness teaching, or progressively lessening our dependence on the coarser levels of mind and getting to this subtler level. Both of these are premised upon understanding the nature of reality. And in this way, and here we can, one point that emerges is that whether we are talking about liberation, nirvana, or samsara, unenlightenment or ignorance, in the end is a function of our mind, function of our, either ignorance or elimination of ignorance. So therefore, in Indian traditions in general, and particularly in Buddhist tradition, there's so much emphasis placed on understanding the nature of mind. Because even whether we are talking about wisdom or ignorance, we are talking about consciousness. And so getting understanding of consciousness becomes really crucial. And that has nothing to do with religion. It's really understanding reality. It can be treated as an academic subject. Therefore, of course, Buddhist tradition, classical Buddhist traditions take great interest in understanding the physical world. There are various theories and ideas about the physical world. But when it comes to the understanding the material world, contemporary science is very advanced. There's very rich, detailed understanding and account of the nature of the physical world. But where there are big gaps in the contemporary science is really in the area of mind science. And this is one area where Indian tradition in general, and particularly Buddhism, has a lot to offer. Not only is there huge discussions and understanding of the theory of mind and consciousness and so on, but also there are techniques and methods that are developed, for example, like how to develop a focused mind with single pointedness, and how to develop our critical faculty so that we will be able to examine the nature of reality in a very probing manner. So these are broadly referred to as the two types of practices. One is the resting, shamatha type practice. The other one is analytic, discursive, vipassana practice. So that's one of the reasons why we have had so many dialogues with scientists, and scientists who are particularly working in the mind science domain find dialoguing with Buddhist scholars and Buddhist thought very enriching and beneficial. And for example, like neuroscience, as they begin to dig deeper into the brain and its correlates with consciousness, they are beginning to even talk about brain correlates of even conceptual thought processes, thoughts and ideas and so on. But the one basic fact is, even with that sophisticated explanation, the underlying concept seems to be still quite impoverished. For example, there is no categorical distinction between sensory modalities versus the mental, what in the Indian tradition we would call manas or yigisheva. That distinction between wangxie, sensory modality versus mental modality, doesn't seem to be even there. So here in Buddhist Indian tradition and Buddhist sources, we find all of these differentiations in a very detailed way: sensory versus concept, thought, and mental versus sensory, and subtle levels of consciousness, coarser levels of consciousness. So therefore, there is a huge resource when it comes to the mind science where scientists can really benefit, and Buddhist dialogue with Buddhism can contribute to that body of knowledge.
Now,
So-
till I think later part of 20th century, 20th century, you see people, I think, never pay attention about mind. So when we say mind, just a brain. Now, as a result of investigation, people who already sort of die, their heart beating stop, then blood circulation to brain stop. Then, generally speaking, he dead, but body still remain fresh. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like that. So, through scientific sort of the because of the
Tradition.
So no explanation. Then another thing, young children, some very clearly mentioned about their past life, very clearly. I also met some young sort of child, some Indian also, not Buddhist. I met 2 Indian small girl, very, very clearly memory, remember about their past life. their home, their parents, their sort of relatives, like that. So now, gradually, you see, scientists who simply, you see, believe brain, now they begin to investigate. There is something which affects on our brain. So what is that? Now we say chit or mind. So now gradually now among some scientists now begin to think or investigate about what the factor which affect our brain. And also you see children who remember about past life very convincingly, right? So brain completely new. Their past body's brain, you see, dead, gone. Then what's the sort of, what thing brings memory about past life? So these sort of factor, we have to find answer according pure scientist. So now, later part of 20th century, you see some scientists now really showing interest about mind. When we say mind, the different level, as I already mentioned. So now, you see some material in Buddhist literature. So therefore, Buddhist literature, we can divide three: science, philosophy, and religion. Since a few years, I request to compile about science, mainly science of mind. Then philosophy. So now, I was told some Chinese universities professors, you see, after seeing this book, they a little bit sort of surprised. Tibetan Buddhist tradition is something scientific religion. It is true. It is true. More subtle level, I think science at the Buddhist sort of concept, I think mutual learning, very useful, very helpful. So I myself consider half Buddhist monk, half scientist. Like that. So now in 300 volumes, we can make three parts. I think I already mentioned. One, science, mainly mind, and then particles, and then wave, these things, something, some information from Buddhist text. Then philosophy, now quantum physics, quite similar, the Nagarjuna's sort of view, like that. So these are academic subject, not religious, not necessarily religious thing. So we can divide science, philosophy, and religion. Religion for Buddhist practitioner. But two other academic subjects. So I thought useful to combine, like that. So now.
Thank you. Yes, Your Holiness. Sorry, Your Holiness.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
Now some questions.
Yes. Yes, sorry, Your Holiness. Thank you so much. That was so amazing. I feel like you answered nearly all my questions in one go. And Your Holiness, it seems like these books can be considered a record of the Nalanda master's reasonings, their analysis, and that you're hopeful that it helps the dialogue with scientists, and that might benefit the world. I was wondering, Your Holiness, do you see these books benefiting the world in other avenues other than through a dialogue with scientists?
편도 유급에서 I think I usually mentioning hygiene of physical and hygiene of emotion. Now we need hygiene of physical already we have. Now hygiene of emotion not yet. So now today's world, the over 7 billion human beings, everyone want happy life and healthy physical. But since I think out of ignorance, how to keep peace of mind, then is a certain mental level, some anger, fear, these things should happen. Then the physical hygiene also now has the effect. So now time come, we should pay. We should have knowledge how to keep physical health. That's hygiene of physical. Meantime, we can see many people physically very healthy, but mentally too much worry, too much fear. So they also need hygiene of emotion. These are not religious thing, simply knowledge. So now modern scientists, I think firstly scientists should pay some attention how to bring peace of mind. Not talking next life, not talking Buddhahood or God's place, simply how to be more day by day peaceful mind, and particularly when we come across some problem. In spite of that problem, we can, if we have certain technique, we can keep peace of mind. You know, one sort of was the Shantadeva's book. You see, he mentioned, best teacher is our enemy. From enemy, you can learn many things. So enemy is best teacher, so we should feel grateful. So then I think the essence is real troublemaker is self-centered feeling and things externally come. So to these the problem, the understanding things like enemy, friend is actually firstly our mental creation. So in mental level, equality. And as I mentioned earlier, all troublemaker is best teacher. Thinking this line, you see, you get much peaceful mind. Then that's quite unique Buddhist sort of philosophy. Nothing exists as appears. These are very useful to keep our mind, peaceful mind. When anger comes, we have some method to reduce that. And too much attachment come, we have method to reduce that. So through that way, peaceful mind, equality, like that.
Wow.
So
I
I'm
think
trying, not propagating Buddhism. Simply, you see, you can pick up certain way of thinking as an academic subject, like that. Okay, now next.
Thank you, Your Holiness. I think that was very illuminating, and everyone would love some of that peace of mind. So, Your Holiness, I think now I wanted to ask Dechen, who was Dechen Rachad, who was the translator of the volume, to share a bit of her experience translating the volume with you. So, Dechen, Dr. Rachad.
그래, 줘요.
Hello. I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, firstly, Your Holiness, I would like to thank you so much. I'm deeply honored and most grateful for the opportunity to serve you in this capacity as a translator and to make my humble contribution towards fulfilling your inconceivable wishes. Thank you so much. Okay. As for something interesting, where do I begin? So, translating is often a solitary activity. In this case, I have been fortunate to work with the four Geshe editors in Dharamsala and with John Dunn in Madison, as well as discussing with Ian Coghlan and with Jimper at the end, towards the end of the project. So these collaborations have been among the highlights of my experience. So I think to build Dharma friendships, good friendships, where there is mutual respect and mutual appreciation and mutual trust is like tremendously important. It's a fundamental thing. So that's the foundation of my experience in this case. Now, next point, this text contains a wide range of highly technical material. So translating it in a way that makes it accessible to a modern audience has been a challenge. And that is going to continue. This work of building bridges between the authentic traditional texts, the ideas contained there, and some of the very advanced ideas in the Western disciplines, science, philosophy, and so on. This is going to take a long time. It's going to be a gradual process. There's going to be people writing essays, papers, maybe some collaborations with making books. So I think this particular project, your wonderful project, is a fantastic foundation. This is really reliable. It gives reliable foundation from which we can build bridges. And I think the bridge building will be very interesting indeed. So I would hope to, contribute towards that. If I live long enough, if I keep in good health, I would love to be one of the many people who can contribute towards that. So I guess also in working on this project, it's introduced me further to the wonderful classical Indian Buddhist literature. I already had studied, of course, with some great masters, including yourself, Your Holiness. But to work on translating these texts, one has to delve deeply into the material, and you get a wide range of familiarity there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the wonderful Buddhist scriptures, some of which I'm familiar with from a long time, some of which were quite new to me. So, it's a nice, it enriches my understanding. It's a long process, of course. There's a long way to go, but I really am grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dechen.
That's about it, really. That's, yeah.
Thank you, Dechen. Your Holiness, before we conclude with your closing remarks, I'd like to invite Thupten Jimpa, a longtime principal translator for His Holiness, the series editor, and an integral part of this project as a whole, to share some of his reflections on the importance of the series. Thupten Jimpa.
Thank you. Your Holiness, colleagues and friends, I'm deeply honored to be part of today's book launch of the second volume of Science and Philosophy in the Indian Buddhist Classics, Nangbe Tserida Tadu Kundu. I had the privilege to be present when the first volume was launched in Bodh Gaya, India in 2018. To date, this first volume is being translated into some 13 languages, and many of the translators are actually present joining in this Zoom. One thing I would like to underscore is the highly ambitious nature of the series, of which today's volume is the second. What His Holiness has conceived and created in the form of this series is truly revolutionary in the history of Buddhist thought of more than 2,500 years. For the first time, readers have the opportunity to engage deeply with the science and philosophy from the classical Buddhist sources in a format that is carefully curated for the contemporary reader. These volumes contain lengthy citations from original texts, many of which have never been translated into any European language, making the series a landmark publication. Key motivation on the part of His Holiness creating this special series has been to offer as gifts to the larger world the insights, knowledge, and wisdom of India's great Nalanda masters like Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Asanga, Vasubandhu, Dignaga, Dharmakirti, whom we Tibetans refer to as the six ornaments of the world, Gentuk, Zamlingzebe Gentuk, as well as Shantideva, Shantarakshita, and so forth. We Tibetans take great pride in having been historically the custodian of this Nalanda heritage. This particular second volume is on the science of mind from the Buddhist sources. The volume draws on four main categories of Buddhist literature. One is Abhidharma, roughly psychology and phenomenology, which presents perhaps the world's first systematic attempt to develop what could be called the map of mind. Abhidharma offers the analysis of the structure of our mental life with careful differentiations of the various facets of our experience in terms of what are called mental factors, Cetashika or Simjung in Tibetan. The second source the volume draws on is the Buddhist epistemological writings, especially of Dignaga, Dharmakirti, Dharmottara, and Shantarakshita, known as Pramana epistemology, which His Holiness referred to. Pramana epistemology offers analysis of the nature of consciousness, mind's relationship with reality, and the various modalities of cognition, especially perception and thought. The third source includes Vajrayana text, particularly belonging to the highest yoga class, which His Holiness already referred to, which presents a unique view of consciousness where in the final analysis, mind and body are understood to be two inseparable facets, energy and awareness, lung sem, of a non-dual single reality. Finally, it draws on the Yogacara sources, which present what I might call mind-based technology or meditation techniques to train and transform our mind. As John Donne already noted in his remarks, this volume will be of special importance to contemporary researchers in the fields of neuroscience, psychology, clinical science, and philosophy of mind. As the editor of the series, I would like to thank Dr. Dechen Roshat and Professor John Donne for their masterful translation of this second volume, and John for his excellent essays introducing each of the main sections of the book. I thank Wisdom Publication, its publisher Daniel Etkin, and senior editor David Kittelstrom and his colleague Mary Petrusevich for their dedication to producing such a wonderful, beautiful volume. And of course, I would like to thank the four monastic scholars who worked for many years preparing the Tibetan original of the series. For me personally, it has been truly a profound honor to be able to play some role in making this important vision of His Holiness a reality. Your Holiness, in conclusion, I would like to inform you that the work on the remaining two volumes of the series is well underway, with Professor Donald Lopez translating Volume 3 and Dr. Dejan Roshat working on the final fourth volume.
그래.
Hopefully, these 2 volumes will be released within the next 2 years. And when this happens, the contemporary world will have a most remarkable resource on the insights and wisdom of the great Nalanda masters, just as you have envisioned. Your Holiness, I know as a monk, you do not like to think in terms of personal legacy, but there is no doubt in my mind, at least, that this series will remain one of your greatest gifts to humanity. Thank you.
Okay. Like you see about mind and certain sort of things, the ngombazu abhidhamma
kosha.
abhidhamma kosha. But meantime, we have to keep the gender critics Tini Shesin Samun Jigrum Dini Ngongum Nili Gyoi Never Dogyun Dini Sanjashin Shangi Tusu Chuminju Sadina Lolia Yingin the Chojilam Buddha or the Zitedi Godwa Di any Zigo Maris Sadi Kada Dagotaba Chongu Shibisha Chazangaranzu Di Luk Nishani Yagar Kebe Shungli Jungo Yina Yang, Yanko, Bena Rizu Lingsling Desa Zedi, Takanda Musum Nyungi Yorba. So the Zedi, Kazanga Zustigo Yamari. Ta, she Terikesa, Nazuchita, Kasure, Mashive, Chig, Shin Saba, Chig Rine Saba, Dindit Solea, the Kashurisha. Chazanga de Jugoranji. Para ne lo de yao xiu re sha sa de dong ben ni da ya go le de gi mo kon de xiu ma be o je sa de zhe ge nin da shi de song deng go de je sa o de yin de ya yan shi ge ga ke be sung ze de nga zo ke le gwa ke bu do ko kan da di yang zo sem le sha go shi sha da ga yo zhuo de ge Some questions.
Oh, yes. Some questions. Your Holiness, we were wondering, so you were talking about these books and there being like rational thinking, and they're like records of rational thinking. How does one use these books? How does one use these books to actually, become a better person? And how do they relate to secular ethics, for example?
그래서
secular ethics 대화 컨텐츠 시작해놨어요.
secular. 대로 뒤에 과 가게 생겨 봐.
맞다. 미규마 저 니리 미진알이야. 탭도 주톤 랍자를 가르치지.
And you see not sort of emphasis about next life. right? 가게 생겨 봐. 커도 그렇지 않아도. Okay.
So the point His Holiness is making is that the perspective presented here is actually universal and secular. For example, there is no discussion at all about next life or any of the very specifically Buddhist religious concepts.
So Your Holiness, we were hoping you could talk about, like close with talking about your vision for the book and series. What's your hopes for the whole series and what's your vision for the series?
가서
단다 디저디 디르바친 땡고로 발 리토르 겨우름 지야지 마음배 지 공차저보다 지 비유저 근데 간데시 레와저 나이 둘이 나이 간데나스
I already mentioned you see the modern time you see in the field of material thing highly developed, but about mind, about emotion, there's not much sort of information, not much research work. And the reality, now today's world, a lot of problem, as I mentioned earlier, is our own creation. Meantime, nobody want a problem, but many problems our own creation. So now we need method, to keep our mind more peaceful. When we're facing some problem, how to keep our mind. So for that, it is very useful to know the whole system of our mind, our emotion. So that's my main, the hope. According to my own experience, so like Shantadeva's book, and Nagarjuna, and the Kasa, Aryadeva, so on. This is their book, very helpful to keep my mind peace. See, my life, whole my life, through trouble, problem. But my mind, quite peaceful. So this sort of knowledge, extremely helpful to keep peace of mind. So many human brothers, sisters, certainly can be very useful to know more material, more sort of ideology, or I don't know, how to keep our mind when we face some problem, how to tackle this. So that's my only hope. Okay.
Thank you, Your Holiness. Thank you, Your Holiness. It's been such an honor and privilege to share this time with you. I really, for Wisdom Publications, it's an amazing opportunity to serve His Holiness and to publish these books and work with such fine and distinguished professors and Thupten Jimpala. For us, it's an amazing amount of interdependence that comes together to produce these records of reasoning from the Nalanda tradition and make that offering to the rest of the world. And so, Your Holiness, it's such an honor to be with you, such an honor to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Midwa.
That's all.
Ka, Daro. Tushi.